How's everybody doing today? We got a good show coming on today. This is Antonio Moore coming to you from Tone Talks. We have Yvette Carnell from Breaking Brown in Your Black World. And we're here to have a great discussion about one of your favorites, Mr. Obama. And we're going to have a discussion about whether Obama was the first African-American president. We're going to critique the big piece by ta-Nehisi Coates that's on the cover of the Atlantic, My President Was Black. And we're also going to look at Sandy Darity and my piece. Sandy Darity had a piece in the Atlantic basically chastising Obama about his policies, and I had one in Newsmax doing the same. And I look forward to a positive and productive discussion. What do you want to say anything to the audience, Yvette?
No, I just want to tell the Your Black World Breaking Brown family hello, and this is a conversation that we have to have. Everybody's talking about Trump, but we have to talk about Obama's legacy and kind of how some of his policies may have paved the way for Trump. There's a lot to discuss here, so I'm just looking forward to the conversation.
And one of the things that really I kind of critique, my piece came out on Newsmax, and if you can, just check it out. It was called African Americans Didn't Do Well Under President Obama. And I critiqued a number of things, one of those being his own personal ancestry and connection to Africa and how that relates to ours, being descendants of slaves from West Africa. What I wanted to start off with is really kind of looking at that. Obama comes from Kenya, and I'm going to pull a map up right now. Before I even say where Obama comes from, you have to understand that Africa, the way it's painted on the globe, it doesn't necessarily match how big it actually is. Africa, it has to be shrunk down so it can actually fit on the globe. Represents 10 to 15% of the overall landmass of the whole world, and we primarily came from West Africa. I did my Ancestry.com. Nothing came out of anywhere other than the Congo, Benin. That's pretty much it. I mean, it's like Nigeria. I had a little bit. It's all West African countries. Obama, on the other hand, is from, and I'm gonna put an arrow, East Africa. He descends from Kenya. Kenya has very little, if nominal, contact with the American slave trade, let alone the transatlantic slave trade, because they took their slaves from West Africa. And I just wanted to get Yvette's analysis on whether that has any effect on his ability to connect to this whole larger diaspora argument of the transatlantic slave trade.
Well, I said a long time ago that Obama's problem is that he's not African American. And I got roasted for it because I said it in probably I think it was 2012. And so I don't think people were really ready to hear it because we see everything through the lens of blackness and skin color. And so people tell me, oh, Yvette, he's blacker than you. So what are you talking about? And no, he's not more African American than me. My mother grew up on a sharecropper farm. My father's black. He's not more African American than me. So, him being from what you're basically saying when you say he comes from Kenya, people need to understand what that means. That means that he's not anchored anywhere in the ancestry of where we come from in terms of being descendants of these American slaves who came from Africa. He's not descended from that, and he's not anchored in that African American experience because the other side was white. So what you have, and I said this before, and you and I have talked about this, if you really want to connect with Obama, his white mother probably, they had a slave in her had a slave in her genealogy, had a slave in her pool. So if you're connecting, you probably connect more with his mother than you do him in terms of where he comes from. So I think people need to understand that when we talk about framing Obama.
I agree. And for me, I had a line in my piece, and I shared it on your show. I'll share it now. Stepping across the dust of slaves and remnants of civil rights leaders, President Obama, half Kenyan descendant and half white, stood at the mountaintop that Dr. King stated he may not be alive to see and proclaimed nothing, focusing on the needs of struggling black families. And so, when I see it, I'm looking at it in the context of, we've heard the arguments and we've dealt with it on your Facebook page in the last week about the Caribbean analysis and us all connecting through the transatlantic slave trade. Then you hear the larger arguments of we're all coming from Africa. But if you follow that rabbit hole, every human comes from Africa. And I mean, here we have Obama's white mother has one slave possibly in 1640 that's in her slave line. Does that make her black as well? I wouldn't argue that she is. What we're talking about is the social cost of blackness, riveting throughout your family and your familial line and showing up in so many ways in terms of wealth, in terms of theft, in terms of lynchings, in terms of mobs. My great grandfather, Aaron Moore, actually he was ran out of Noxubee County, Mississippi, because he was speaking out and things of the sort. Obama doesn't have that in his family line. So when we come to this reality where people kind of frame him, and like on this shirt, where Obama's seen with Malcolm X and Martin Luther King, I think that's a problem for me. You know, you agree?
Well, why would he be? Why would he be on that shirt? I mean, I always say it's ignorant when people say black people should be more like Asians. Like, which Asians are you talking about? Because Asians don't even describe themselves as Asians, and they have other groups of Asians that don't necessarily like other groups of Asians, and they're not necessarily that they're pitted against each other, but these are just not monolithic groups. That's just the way it works. So, but one of the things that when I wrote what I wrote about Obama, I had a guy of Chinese American spoke out to me, and he said, listen, what we have to look at, even in terms when you look at my ancestors, once you're 150 years in America, you usually lose contact because you don't have any more family there with your homeland, even for people who had a homeland to go to, even for people who weren't sold away. So to look at us and say we still have that, when everybody's saying, like, even if you want to be more like this Chinese American guy, what you would say is he has assimilated and he has said that America is like his country. So what I'm saying is that Obama, in terms of who Obama is, in terms of who we are, in terms of how we talk about ourselves, it makes no sense for Obama to be on that shirt, especially when you think about who was King. Like, what did King do? Like, what did Malcolm X do? Like, when you talk about these people, you're talking about people who took bullets for the cause. You're talking about people who took bullets so that black people could live better lives. How dare you? You look at the wealth gap expanded during the Obama administration, and you want to put him on there with King and X? Like, that makes no sense.
Yeah, and I got this shirt for this discussion. I just want to caveat that, and the top of the discussion it is kind of like what I posed in my Newsmax piece. Was Obama the first African American president? And part of the reason I say that is when you look back to when African American was coined by Jesse Jackson in '88. In large part, it was done for the progeny of slaves. It was done as a way for the lost people that came from slavery to connect back to where they didn't know where they came from. Obama knows where he comes from, and also where he comes from didn't have slavery at all. And I guess for me, the concept of African American kind comes to a questionable point where we start to analyze and look, has our science like kind of advanced past the turn? When I say that, I mean we now can do genetic tests. I've done my own genetic test. I'll pull it up so everybody can kind of see it. I come from West Africa. That's just what it is. So I would argue that I'm West African American with a Congo concentration, not just African American. And I guess that, like, for me, like, the problem that I have is that when you think about African American, it's a continent and a country, and it's the largest continent in the whole world by far. Again, I'll pull up that large map. It's like somebody from Chile saying I'm South American. It doesn't make any sense, like in a context, to have a continent and then a country, other than for us, because we kind of made it because we didn't know where we come from. Obama is Kenyan American. That's what he is. I just don't think he wins the presidency as Kenyan American. And it's a trip because when you talk to people who are from these countries, even West African countries, they consider themselves from there. They don't consider themselves African American in large part. They're Nigerian, let alone even Nigerian American, but not African American. That's too large a landmass to actually denote classification for them, you know?
Like, who connects themselves? Like, when's the last time you heard somebody connect themselves to a continent? Do you hear Irishmen running around saying, I'm repping my European heritage, I'm down with Europe? You don't hear anybody saying that. What they say is that I'm British. What they say is that I'm Scottish. What they say is I'm Finnish. What they say is I'm Irish. They connect to a country. They connect to nationalism. And they connect to countries because countries have dollars. Countries have actual money and resources.
Language and culture.
And culture. All of that history, legacy, lineage. That's how you connect with each other. And that's how we connect through being African Americans, being descendants of slaves in this country. That's how we connect with each other as African Americans. This idea that somebody can have the same complexion as you, and you discount all heritage, you discount all shared lineage, you discount all ancestry. So somebody can say to me, well, Obama couldn't catch a cab. Well, guess what? There are darker skinned Mexicans who can't catch a cab. There are Filipinos who can't catch a cab. because of how they look, but does that mean that they're African American? I mean, and is that how we define ourselves?
I agree. I agree. The other one you hear often is, well, white people will treat him like a black person. That's not what blackness is defined as. I mean, if for example, if a white person treats a tiger like a lion, it still don't make the tiger a lion. The tiger ain't gonna go and be in prides with other lions and stuff. The tiger is solo. And so, like, I just think that flawed analysis gives too much power to white people to define who we are, rather than us taking it back and saying, no, this guy is not of us. And I think we so bad wanted to have something that we accepted anything. And that anything came in the form of Obama, I have to say.
We just can't escape the white gaze, right? That's what we do. Like, everything we do is a reaction to the white gaze. Well, if they treat us this way, then we're going to be this way. So what you're really doing, like, you have people say all day long that white people are oppressors. White people do this and white people do that. Well, why are you accepting their definitions of who you are if that's how you feel? The last thing you want to do is accept their definitions. They probably do view all people of color, you know, a term which I hate, but they probably do group us all into the same group. That has nothing to do with how we define ourselves, or at least it shouldn't. So that's the conundrum, and that's what we're caught up at. But it's ignorant. I think, you know, you don't, a lot of times we don't really want to say that, but you have to, at a point, come to it, like, you're ignorant, and you're being ignorant by not having distinctions for who you are. Like, who we are matters in this country in terms of what we have to lay a claim on. It matters in terms of being descendants from slaves in the richest country in the world and being on the bottom. And you can't just say, well, you know what, everybody like us. All of y'all come here and y'all all just like me because y'all have melanin too. That's not a distinction that matters.
I agree. I mean, this would be as ignorant as an El Salvadorian allowing themselves to be defined as Mexican because a white person saw them and thought they were Mexican. It just doesn't make any kind of sense. You know,
and it wouldn't happen with anybody else.
It wouldn't happen.
You don't see them doing that.
Yeah, it wouldn't happen like that. Now, let's move to the second part, which is, you know, there's also this critique that, you know, Obama's half white. But not only is he half white, he was raised by white people. And what Sandy Darity and his piece in the Atlantic makes clear is that these were affluent white people. You know, these were affluent whites in I'm not saying rich, but affluent whites in Hawaii. What does that mean in terms of his conceptual understanding of blackness in your mind?
I think it means that, like let me just give you an example. If you're raised in an African American home, you're probably raised around other African American people. We normally live around each other. We have family, aunts, uncles, things like that. We have people that tell the story like you just told. Then you have stories like I was talking to my dad a while ago, and I found a picture of him and my mom. And so I said, hey, y'all were looking cute on this picture. Y'all looking sharp back in the day. And he says, yeah. He says to me, yeah, that's the only place a nigga could eat back then. And we took a picture downtown. That was the only place. Like, these are the stories you grow up hearing. And so they're not theoretical. They're not purely intellectual. We understand this from a familiar landscape, from how our parents and grandparents and aunts and uncles were treated. He's looking at this. What you see with Obama is that he's looking at this from a totally intellectual lens. That's not an emotional connection. So when you ask why he didn't fight, what you find out is that he didn't have that emotional connection to African Americanness. He didn't think about somebody, I had my grandmother talking about how crosses were burned, and she used to live there in the country. He had none of that to kind of connect him emotionally to him hitting his gut. So I think that's what was missing. He was raised with white people. And so part of that too is, if you're raised with white people, how bad can white people really be? Because they've always been nice to me. That's what he's thinking.
Yeah, and I really do come back to when your mother is white, so much of your first understanding of people comes through your mother. And when your mother is white, and then you're expected to really grasp or understand like blackness and like what black people go through, particularly if you're raised in such a environment that's isolated from blackness. No way am I saying that if you have a white mom and you're at Crenshaw High School here in South Central Los Angeles that you can't grow up black. But I think that the fight is that much more for you to have with race. And I think he didn't have to have that fight because it was kind of like he was kind of ostracized from it in a lot of ways. I mean, you have to realize, you're talking about 1974 Hawaii, and this is where the guy grew up. And not to mention he grew up in a couple of other places internationally. And then the last part is his mom isn't just any white person. She comes from an affluent family, and she has a PhD. So, I mean, and this isn't to say that that's bad. I'm just saying these are things that isolated him from a general understanding of the black experience. And in so many ways, I think him being biracial, it was just too many things going on with him for him to represent us appropriately. Just too much of a mix. And it's funny because we'll get into Coates, but while Coates is enamored with it, I'm actually like wondering whether he should. Well, not even wondering. I believe he shouldn't have been the representative for like Black America. He should have just ran as a Kenyan American that wanted to try to be president. Problem is he wouldn't have won. He needed us to win.
Yeah, and he needed to fool us to win. Let's say he needed to fool us to win. He needed to fool us and dance and do Al Green, and I was like, yeah, he's one of us. He needed to marry Michelle and win, because before Michelle there were a lot of white women. So you needed to do all of that. And I don't have a problem with interracial dating. What I have a problem with is you picking somebody black because you want to run for office, because you want to get the black vote. And that's kind of what I feel. People can be upset if they want to, but I just don't think your taste changed that much. What I'm saying in terms of, like, if I ask you right now, Antonio, when did you decide to be black? You're gonna look at me like, what are you talking about, Yvette? Like, what are you high? So, but in that Coates piece, Obama says that Obama saw a bunch of basketball players and he thought that was cool, and he downloaded Blackness. Like, that's not what most African Americans do. We don't download Blackness. It's just what we are. It's a culture we're born into. It's the legacy. It's the lineages we're born into. So you can't see Obama and see us and not believe that there's a distinction, a clear line of demarcation between Obama and African Americans. And we weren't ready to see it because we were so desirous to have someone who looked like us, and liked our culture in the White House. And we had a bit of that in terms of how Bill Clinton manipulated us. So we wanted some more of that, and that's what we got. But we need to understand that that's why it didn't materialize into meaning anything. He didn't want to fight for us. He didn't have that emotional connection with us, and he still doesn't.
Yeah, I have to totally agree that in so many ways, the way that we digested Obama was like he's our brother rather than a politician, and that was purposefully done to confuse us. Had he run a traditional neoliberal campaign, standard posters, no Stevie Wonder, I would have expected a lot less from him. But he tricked so many blacks that yearned for a nostalgia of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and a new leader, that in the end, it wasn't wrong for them to expect those things. I have a line in my Newsmax piece that says, "Media love fest with Obama's mixture of personal identity do not change the certainty of his political identity. A man born to a Kenyan parent was able to play Stevie Wonder's Signed, Sealed, Delivered, befriend Jay-Z, and evoke memories of Dr. King to make a nation feel its conscience had been cleaned of its greatest sin, American slavery." So, like, you have him, having Jay-Z and doing daps with Jay-Z, and you have him sounding like Dr. King. In 2004, he didn't sound that way. This is not his natural dialect, what you hear now. He was trained to sound like Dr. King to evoke this nostalgia. And this is well noted that after his loss in 2004, he goes back and he kind of tries to figure it all out. You don't realize that Oprah is so critical to Obama's rise in 2006, 2007. When Oprah brings him out on her show, she has to turn against her entire audience of white females who really want Hillary and basically say, no, this is my guy. So he used so many of the tokens of black, I guess, he used so much of black, like, political capital to get elected that it was only right after we voted for him at 93% for us to expect things. I mean, you got to go back and look at the numbers. He didn't win the white vote. We just came out and voted without him having to offer us anything, meaning black people. What would you say?
I've never had to wait in line before Obama in a black neighborhood. I've never had to wait in line. But we had to take out chairs. We had to take out chairs when I went to vote, and I went to vote with my mom. We had to take out chairs. Like, I've never had that happen before. And so what you have to understand, and this is what I tell people. People say, "Oh my God, Yvette, why are you saying this? He's not a messiah. He's not this." And I said, listen. Your problem in terms of your conversation with me is that you don't understand politics. Politics is an exchange. I give you my vote in exchange for a set of policy initiatives that you're going to champion. That's what it's about. I don't give you my vote for nothing and just hope for the best. No, that's what it's about. And if you don't understand it's an exchange, then that's when you get caught up. That's when you say, well, he did the best he can. No, some things were supposed to materialize for us. That's why I tell people all the time, we as African Americans, as African American community alone, we turned red states blue for Obama. That's what we did. We flipped states for him. When you look at like North Carolina, we flipped states for him. That means that he owes us a debt. You can't say he didn't owe us a debt and he didn't come through. He used our political capital as leverage to get him elected, to get him reelected, and then he didn't come through for us. So yeah, that's a problem.
And when you go back and now you see things that come out in the WikiLeaks, and again, people will say, well, the WikiLeaks are stolen. No, they've been pretty much authenticated as real emails. And what you find is that from 07, he was pretty much a neoliberal candidate that had no intentions to help black people. 07. So you have a guy running a certain kind of campaign, but then no intention to help you and your family. And when I say that, let me be specific. Rahm Emanuel becomes his chief of staff. And for those people that don't know politics, your chief of staff kind of sets your first 100 days. Rahm Emanuel particularly says, I don't want to rock the boat in the first 100 days. Essentially signaling nothing of race orientation will be dealt with in the first 100 days. Well, what we found out is race won't be dealt with for 8 years. And so, like, Obama was not the candidate that he promised to be. His policies, at best, were if we help all people, we may help black people. And what we'll talk about later is how Sandy Darity, the economist I interviewed 2 weeks ago, you can see that on my page, Tone Talks, or you can see it on Breaking Brown as well on YouTube. He makes clear that's not enough. Like, black people are on the verge of economic collapse. And essentially without efforts like reparations, baby bonds, your kids will become a significantly obvious underclass. And Obama is a key part of why that's about to happen. And I come back to it, and I guess there is no policy other than the Affordable Care Act, which most blacks can't even access in the South because, I mean, many blacks, let me not say most, can't access in the South because of how it was set up. But, like, other than that, nothing he did really helped black people. Everybody likes to talk about the incarceration. I did a documentary that was Emmy nominated for on mass incarceration. What he's done as far as incarceration releases is not what you think. In effect, what do I mean? It was so bad that a few people, one particular, rejected it. He said, I'll just wait for my regular time. Because what he did was, first he enacted like crack cocaine sentencing changes. Then he brought suits to make sure that it wasn't applied retroactively. So if you just do it now, nobody's going to jail for crack now. It's about the people that went to jail in the 80s and the 90s. Then the second thing that he did is he's commuting sentences. He's not letting people out. He's shortening the sentences and then possibly even lengthening probation. So you just end up with there's no job training, no psychological repair, no admission of fault by the government that maybe that these sentences were just horribly long. Not like he says it. I'm saying literally saying these people are destroyed because we unfairly enforce the laws of crack versus cocaine. There's none of that. And I come back to this idea that the Republicans obstructed him. I talked to Byron Allen, who is a billionaire, and he explained that you can see it in his piece, 8 Solutions to Make America Great Again. Just Google that. Obama had so many things at his disposal that weren't used, from threatening to audit banks to stopping mergers that weren't including black people. He did none of it, you know?
And what you're describing are things that were totally at his discretion. When you talk about, look at the SBA and the loans that he gave out. He gave out 1% of those loans to small businesses, to black businesses. 1%. It was like 8% under George Bush, and he gave out 1%. That's something that was totally within his discretion. He could have put in place, and had his people say, "Listen, I want to see more loans go out to black people. I want to see you recruit black businesses. I want to see you get out there and bring them in here. If Bush can do 8%, I can do 10. I can do 15." That's what he should have done. He didn't do that, and the Republicans didn't keep him from doing that. And you mentioned Rahm Emanuel as like the marker, of letting us know, okay, that was like a flashpoint to let us know he's not going to be doing anything for African Americans. In the first 100 days is when you want to get the most stuff done, because that's when you really have a moment, especially when you consider his election. You really have a moment where people are just like, we're going to let him do his thing, and he ruined that. But even with what we go with WikiLeaks, even if we go before that to WikiLeaks, now we know that Citigroup picked out his cabinet. They mapped out his cabinet for him. So even before then, he wasn't doing. You can't have a cabinet that's picked by Citigroup and do things for African Americans. That's not how this works.
Isn't that so telling? Because I mean, here you have so many blacks saying, "Well, wait till Trump gets in." Your lives are sitting on a deck of cards. and you're talking about wait till Trump gets in. It was whether like Darity says to me in my interview of him. Darity is again an economist from Duke, also a professor, one of the foremost structural economists, which is an economist that studies legacy wealth, intergenerational wealth. And what he basically said is they both are like a plutocracy is going to exist, meaning a government that's run by the most rich people, whether Hillary was elected or whether Trump was elected. One is just a bit more honest. Obama was part of that plutocracy. So stop making Obama out to be Dr. King or some savior and start looking at the reality of of a wealth situation where the middle black family in this country is worth $1,700 when you take out the family card. Under Obama, black families lost 30% more in wealth than white families. 30% more. These are realities of, I mean, you have some of the highest in Wisconsin today. In Milwaukee, Wisconsin, African-American male unemployment is 50%. That's called social collapse. That's not, I'm not looking for a job. You know, and I just think that we got to start dealing with that instead of celebrating My Brother's Keeper, an unfunded program that he set up to kind of take some pictures. And then we allowed him to take pictures with our kids that he didn't help. That don't make sense.
No, it doesn't make sense at all. When you think about My Brother's Keeper, like, people don't understand when you say it's unfunded. People say, well, at least he tried to do something. Unfunded means that after Obama's gone, it's gone.
It means he didn't try to do nothing.
After Obama's gone, you're not going to see it. And then it puts the auspices, you know, like Darity said this in his piece. It still puts the auspices back on us in terms of helping us do better. No, what we need is structural change. Like, the terrain is messed up. What we have is
flesh that out. Let's flesh that out, Yvette. Flesh this out. Because I just talked to Darity today again for about an hour, maybe about 40 minutes. And one of the things that you have to flesh out is Obama has a respectability kick that really you see in immigrants much more often than us. And that means that something is wrong with us, and that's why we're not doing well. That's what Obama starts from. If you don't understand anything else from this conversation, understand this point. My Brother's Keeper presumes that something is wrong with our young black men. No, the system is wrong. And it's so wrong that it had slavery, that it had Jim Crow laws to shut us down. It's so wrong that we have 10,000 per 100,000 young African-American men are locked up. A normal rate is 200 per 100,000. A normal rate is 200 per 100,000. One of the highest that we've seen was 800 per 100,000. That was during apartheid for black males. Today in America, young black men are incarcerated at a rate of 10,000 per 100,000. That is called systemic failure, created failure by a system recreating itself from slavery forward. And I just really wanted to take this time to ask this question: was Obama the first African American president? In my view, based on the policies and his own family lineage, he isn't the first African American president. He is the first non-white president, but he isn't the first African American president. And in so many ways, he should not have been able to use my family or Yvette's family or your family's lineage to get elected. If he had played Bono, said I'm a Kenyan American, and just ran and won, I'd be with him. The only problem is he wouldn't have won. He needed Motown to win. He needed Stevie. He needed Jay-Z. He needed you.
Well, no, I agree. I think people have to understand in America we're the descendants of slaves and slaveholders, and you know that's who we are. We don't even have the same relationship. Like we were talking about, in America, your great granddaddy might be white because that's just poor white people. We intermix. Like when you're 13% of a population, when you're 13% and the majority is white, that's just how it happens. That's not how it happens in most African countries where it's majority black. Like that is a different experience wholly. Like even if he had grown up, so his father, being a Kenyan, still had a totally different experience than African Americans living in this country. So I think that's what you have to understand in terms of what happens to us in this country. And so for you to come here and adopt that and just say, I'm going to pull this cloak of African Americanness over me, and I'm going to do these things that signal African Americanness in order to get the African American vote. And then when you get it, you say, I'm not the president of just black people. I'm the president of everybody. That's not how you campaign, though. You should have campaigned that way. You should have campaigned as the president for everybody. You should have been listening to all kinds of music. You shouldn't have had a Black Stevie Wonder song as your theme. You shouldn't have been talking like, yeah, brother, and giving people high five. No, you should have just been like, You should have just been like Cory Booker in a way, like just regular neoliberal without all that other stuff. And then I'll be like, well, you know what?
That's what I said too. And you also, what I'll end this section on, because we're going to do pretty much like 3 sections. One will be this one, and then Coates. We're going to critique Coates' piece, and then we're going to add in Darity's piece, and that'll be the end of it. But one thing that I will say is just very personal to me, because Obama's the same age as my father. My father had me really young. And so, like, you don't understand. So many people don't understand. For somebody that's 55 years old, crack was the game. Like, crack was the... It's funny because Obama's also the same age as Freeway Rick. Like, they're pretty much all in the same little era. The only difference is that his daddy was an MA from Harvard, meaning Obama's. And so, like, here you have a guy that's trafficking on the struggles. Like, Reaganomics comes down. These black men don't have any opportunity. But Obama has all the opportunities on one side of being white, because his family's white. And then in addition to that, he has a daddy that's an MA from Harvard. So when it's time to go to Harvard, he can be an alumni, a legacy kid. And in Harvard, that's like 30% of the admission. And excuse me if I'm wrong, but it is a lot of the admission process. Particularly if you're a black person that can check that box. And then to then be told, be represented to everybody. I mean, there's a picture of him touching this black boy, this little black boy, as a role model. What is he a role model of? That a white kid with a Harvard legacy can get into Harvard? That's what he's a role model of.
Yeah,
like that a white, because I mean, when I say that, I mean, I'm not dealing with him being half white. I'm saying he lived with whites and had access to white wealth. But then he also had a dad who was a Harvard legacy kid. You can't use him as a role model for a little black boy in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, that doesn't know his father. He's not his role model. He's not a guidepost. He's not any of those things. And so, like, until you understand and stop looking and look beyond color and say, because they're both the same color, then he can be his role model, you don't understand structural economist, like, analysis of things. And we'll get to Darity. An analysis that says you are defined by your father and mother in a way that you don't even understand, particularly in the world that we're going into as we turn not just this Trump corner, but the globalization, wealth consolidation corner described by Thomas Piketty in his book, Capital in the 21st Century. It's coming. Whether Trump got elected, it's coming. And actually, it's here, I should say.
Well, I think you could. I think you would even go a little bit further in terms of how you're defined by your mother and father. Well, let's talk about how we're defined. You're defined by the transfer of resources from your mother and father to you. He got transferred whiteness from his mother and a very nice family and good. Not only was he had her, he had his grandparents too. And on the other side, you have a father that went to Harvard, so he's transferring you legacy and going into Harvard and all that stuff. These are good things to have. These are good things to have going into college or going into life. Right?
The best things in the world, really. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
American whiteness and a Harvard legacy.
You have to define yourself by that. Like, at a certain point, you have to don't say I can be like Obama. At a certain point, you have to be honest with yourself and say, what does Obama have that I will never have? And ask yourself and think about how those things define him in a way that you will not be defined and you will not get those things in your life to move you forward. It doesn't mean being negative. This is just making an accurate analysis about what's true and what's false in life.
I agree. And so now we'll transition. Ta-Nehisi Coates did this piece in the Atlantic. It was called "My President Was Black." For those that didn't understand, like, the reference, it kind of goes back to Young Jeezy. Here you have a guy writing in the Atlantic that's going back to Young Jeezy. My president is black, and kind of like using that to make a bit of a puff piece for Obama called "My President Was Black." I'll pull that up on screen. Last week we read it, and really, I'm gonna be honest, I wasn't impressed. I wasn't enthused about it, and that's not just because I had a problem with his writing style. I felt it was wildly inaccurate. I thought it was very unfair to Black America in several points, and it was too personal in the sense of much more about his personal relationship and feelings about Obama rather than what we needed, which is especially in a magazine of that type, which is what Darity gave us, which is a step back kind of analysis of whether Obama had done anything to help black people. And Darity's piece actually did that, and we'll talk about that second. And Darity's piece, to give you kind of a hint, and you can look it up, how Barack Obama failed black Americans. So, what do you think?
Well, it was a bad piece, and I think it was a bad piece for a lot of reasons. First of all, he did a lot of descriptions there, but didn't make it like there's a part in this thing where he's talking about people making jokes about good hair and paper bag tests and all of that kind of stuff, which is really something I expect more to hear from boomers than somebody who's of Generation X. But even when you go to the meat of what he's saying, like he never says anything about the number of he says something about how so many black people have Obamacare, which is just not true. Like he says something like a third, and I mean it's just. I think he wildly inflates a lot of the stuff that he says, and then his own insecurity comes through because there's a couple times he says like, "Well, I interviewed the president, but I messed up two of the interviews because one time I just calibrated my tone wrong and I wore the wrong clothes." And I'm just wondering, you're doing a piece on the president. We're talking about his policies and everything that means. Like this is a sort of cringeworthy way he describes his own insecurities when he's trying to do this. And then even when he takes it a step further, you get to the end and he's talking about what Trump didn't have. And it's just like, do you not understand that your president, my president was black, didn't have a resume? I mean, on so many levels, like
Explain that.
Obama hadn't really done anything. He had like a couple of jobs. He was the professor, community organizing. He didn't. So you're saying that Obama had to be perfect. Obama had to be this, but Trump just had to, get xenophobes and racists and stuff. But it's like, listen, regardless of what we feel about Trump, he's been doing business longer, which is what his vocation is, than Obama had been doing anything. When he came in there, Obama had a very short resume. That's why people you took a chance on him. We took a chance on a guy who wasn't particularly savvy in terms of politics. That's another thing.
He was a junior senator, and people don't understand what a junior senator. Like he only been a senator for like 2 years, and pretty much without the rocket boost of blackness and all the cool that comes along with it, because post Motown, post Cosby, post hip hop. There was a lot of capital there for somebody to use, and without that rocket boost, he's just an unknown, and he still would be just a young senator even today. Well, actually, he'd be a little further up the rungs, but as far as becoming president, no, I don't think so. So what I want to do, to be fair to Ta-Nehisi Coates, is I'm going to read a few sections, 4 or 5 of them, maybe even a few more. And then I'm going to let Yvette chime in, and then I'm going to chime in so you guys can see some of the sections that we critique the most. The first one I have is whiteness in America. And these are sections directly from the piece, My President Was Black. You can Google that. I just want you to be able to get the whole piece if you do want to do your own analysis. But these are summary sections that we have major problems with that I just want to kind of critique. Whiteness in America is a different symbol. A badge of advantage in a country of professed mediocratic competition. This badge has long ensured an unerring privilege represented in a 220-year monopoly on the highest office in the land. And the reason why I kind of pulled that out is whiteness isn't a badge. And it's funny because Darity, and I've become friends with Darity. I interviewed him and I really like him. And he kind of took Coates to task, and I'll read that section later on. But no, whiteness is all the wealth. Let me show you. Let me give you an example. I write on Institute for Policy Studies, Inequality.org. I've written there almost 10 or 12 pieces. One of them I did was on land, agricultural land. In America today, white people own 98% of the agricultural land, worth 97% of the money. 6 white families own more land than all of black families combined. Whiteness isn't a badge, and then we just are badgeless as black people. No, we're not in the game right. We're not in the game. They're playing a whole game, and we're not even in the stadium. We somewhere else. And I think because we go to the same malls, and because we can go to the school next to them, we don't understand the gravity of dimension and how while we're spending future earnings that we may never be able to make because we're going to always have student debt till we die, they're using money that they got from your great-great-grandfather's body to pay for the same school. And I don't call it a badge. What do you think, Yvette?
No, I think what we always miss, right? When you start calling it a badge, what when you really go into it, you kind of go into this discussion about, this is hearts and minds, right? So this badge is something that we look at and we see white people, and so we believe they're better than black people. And so what we need to do is give white people something to see us differently. And so we'll have badges too. It becomes like this emotional argument. And so what you have to realize is that the Achilles heel of that argument, which we need to tear at all the time, is that no, this is about resource. This is not about a badge. This is about resources. This is about stuff that's in the economy. There's wealth in the economy that comes from free labor, from African slaves who were our ancestors. There's also poverty. So the white people amassed the wealth, and the poverty is still stuck with us. The poverty is still stuck with black people. So that's not about badges. That's about how do we flip that up? How do we get some of that in terms of those resources that we're owed, legitimately owed? Not about a badge. The whole badge thing is just like, it's kind of like black respectability, which is interesting because Coates used to, kind of denounce that sort of thing. But it's in a way because it kind of makes you believe that if white people saw us differently, like if they looked at us and saw a badge on us too,
yeah,
then like everything would be different. Or if they looked at us and saw a white person, life would be different. You still don't have the resources. You don't have the resources. You still don't have the money.
And it's a trip because we even look at the resources in isolation. So many people talk about slavery, but there was Jim Crow after. And I'm going to pull up a chart that I share every once in a while to give you an idea of the length of time. And I shared this on the Byron Allen interview. If you look at America across, before it even started, you look at it from in quadrants of 4, 1600, 1700, 1800, and 1900. Black people was enslaved all of the 16 almost, all of the 17, all of the 18. And it didn't just end in the 18 like when Lincoln says, let the slaves be free. It wasn't until the FBI actually enforced some of that stuff in the mid-40s that they finally let some of these slaves off their plantation. They kept them under almost like slavery still. And so like when you look at it, and then Jim Crow came, and Jim Crow could be just as insidious in terms of, Jim Crow was not about just you can't drink out of a water fountain. These were laws to shut us down. And then you come in today and you look at mass incarceration, but also look at that payday loan on your corner. Look at all of the insidious ways that white people are in your neighborhoods. And I think that it's a trip because that's what Coates doesn't grasp. And I think that even in his Twitter, I'll pull that up, when he read Darity's piece, it almost was an awakening for him. And this is the guy that's writing for us on the Atlantic. I don't need him writing for me. I write on Institute for Policy Studies. I do data. And that's why my discussion with Darity was good. I respect Darity because he actually does get on the ground and do the data. And he doesn't just write puff pieces. The next section I want to read is, again from Coates' piece, Obama's formula for closing this chasm between black and white America, like that of many progressive politicians today, proceeded from policy designed for all America. Blacks disproportionately benefit from this effort since they are disproportionately in need. Now, that's just a flawed argument. Darity totally says that doesn't make any... Black people... The presumption of this argument is that the wealth gap is like the middle white family is worth 113 and the middle black family is worth 70. And maybe if we just treat them a little fairer, we'll close that gap. No, black people are worth almost nothing. Let's put it in the middle black family is worth almost nothing. $1,700 is not even a full rent check in some places. While the middle white family is worth $110,000. And that doesn't even deal with the 10% of white families, 8 million homes that have more than $1 million. More than $1 million, up to billions. And I just think that, this is what Coates is saying. Coates is saying that was Obama's formula. That's the guy you elected that was said, if I give everybody health care, then black people will be better. That's not enough. Huh?
But here's the real hypocrisy. And here's the real hypocrisy in Coates' piece. When Bernie Sanders said that, when Bernie Sanders said no to reparations and basically said because I don't think it's practical, and he said let's do classism, let's focus on poor people in general, Coates came and said it's not enough. Why isn't Bernie Sanders in favor of reparations? But when Barack Obama did it, the black guy who is trafficked and leveraged black capital, black political capital, when he did it, it was okay. So there's another part about it that's this hypocrisy of it. And he said, well, it's different for Bernie Sanders because Bernie Sanders is a radical. Well, no, Bernie Sanders has been in politics for like 30 years when you include like the politics before he came to the Senate. He's been in politics for a very long time. This isn't a radical. So why are you, in terms of my support for Sanders, I was like, if that's all we're going to get, we need more, but that's all we're going to get, it's better than the alternative, right? But for Coates to come out and say, and lambast Bernie Sanders, in 2 essays he went after Bernie Sanders. But when your first black president takes the same position, and for you to be like, oh, well, Obama is coming around, I mean, it's ridiculous.
And it's a trip because when we look at the reality of Obama cutting food stamps by, wasn't it like $800 million?
Yeah.
You look at, where are these policies that lifted all boats? They don't even exist in large part.
No.
One of the things that Obama is best known for is the bailout. He didn't have to, like Sandy Darity makes clear, he didn't have to do it that way. He could have did a jobs program. He gave it to the banks, just like Trump will do. But we hate Trump. But we love Obama.
Exactly.
They did. It's the same austerity policies, and it's like we don't understand how similar they are. The next section I'm going to say, and I'll let you answer first. Obama's DNC speech. This is, again, I just want to be clear. I'm reading sections from Ta-Nehisi's Coates, My President Was Black, so we can have a critical analysis and not just talk generally, and kind of let you know some of the sections that really jumped out that were just wrong and problematic in so many ways. Obama's DNC speech is the key. It does not belong to the literature of the struggle. It belongs to the literature of prospective presidents, men who speak not to gravity and reality, but to aspirations and dreams. It's like this Obama's better than black struggle. What?
Yeah, it's like he can speak to it. He's white. It's like, well, he has. Well, it's almost as if Obama's white. So part white. So he can speak to the greatness of America in ways that people who were enslaved were not, as if that's some sort of benefit. And there's a part in there too where he mentions a joke from Sinbad, where Sinbad basically said, this is, y'all had this brother, he from Hawaii and he got all this, eventually y'all gonna have a dude from Cleveland and he gonna have a perm. And it's just like, it almost as if you're mocking like African Americanness, like this is what African Americans are, but this guy isn't like us and he's special. And even Ta-Nehisi calls him like the crown jewel of African Americanness. And like, does your crown jewel is just somebody who gets in a high place and doesn't do anything to dig you out of there, even though you put him in there? That is your crown jewel.
Yeah. And the next section is Obama's embrace of white innocence was demonstrably necessary as a matter of political survival. Whenever he attempted to buck this directive, he was disciplined. His mild objection to the arrest of Henry Louis Gates in 2009 contributed to his declining favorability. Like, come on, dude. And it's a trip because we do have this information that's coming out that Citibank chose his cabinet. We know that Rahm Emanuel was his chief of staff. That wasn't his guy. That was a Clinton guy. That was the Clinton guy that actually was very bad for black people. Like, if you look back at Rahm Emanuel, the things he did to become a rising star, it was devastating to black people. And Obama made him his chief of staff. Obama did not embrace white innocence for survival. No, he believed in it because that's what he was born into. He was born into a white family. That's where he lived. It's like, I don't think the gravity of this isn't just a guy who lives in like LA with a white family and then comes over to Crenshaw, or lives in Atlanta and goes from south to north. No, he lives in Hawaii with a white family in 75. It's like, you got to read his book until he's sitting and reading Ebony and just so enamored by the pages. I mean, you know how many black people was in Hawaii in 75? Come on. You want to say something about that?
I think that is what you have to look at in terms of who Obama was. Like, he's trying to make it like Obama developed the skill to kind of communicate with whites in a way that most African Americans don't know how to do. No, he didn't develop a skill. That's where you come from. That's like saying Antonio developed a skill that when he went into barbershops, he knows how to talk to the people in the barbershop. No, that's just kind of who you are as a black man. You communicate well with other black people. That's not so. He's giving him credit, and like he's giving him credit for something which is actually like a negative. Like, if you had understood, one of the problem is, even when Obama was trying to negotiate with the Tea Party, remember he lost out on that and all of that stuff. When he was trying to negotiate with them, everybody was saying, Obama, you need to fight. But Obama was like, I've come to call Obama the ingratiator in chief. because his life has been, white people have always responded to him good. Like he's always been the guy that comes in with a nice smile, and he said himself, when white people, when I come to a room, I don't think that I have to prove myself. I don't think I have to like convince these people I'm human or whatever, you know. And I think that's a problem, that you came in there with that attitude, because you still, because this is not what you need. That attitude wasn't. Coach tries to paint this as a positive. It was not a positive thing that he was this way. It was one of the reasons why he didn't get anything done.
And it's so funny because it's part of it is just a total misunderstanding of what whiteness and blackness are in terms of context. So often, like I told Darity, we think of it in ratio of a 1-to-1. No, it really means oppressed and not oppressed. It really means foot to neck, and then the person with their foot to your neck. That's what the racial context of white and black is in America. I didn't make it that way. That's just what it is. And like, it's a trip because he never understood that. And Coates didn't hold him to task for that. He basically instead kind of like chastised Black America, meaning Coates did. And I'm going to read another section that kind of brings that to head. Obama's early positive interactions with his white family members gave him a fundamentally different outlook toward the wider world than most blacks of the 60s had. Obama told me he rarely had the working assumption of discrimination, the working assumption that white people would not treat me right, or give me an opportunity, or judge me. He continued the kind of working assumption that white people would discriminate against him or treat him poorly. Here we have a country that for 200 plus years had slavery. For another 75 had Jim Crow. For the last 25 had mass incarceration. And this is the guy we elected the president. Like, he basically did not have the necessary tools to understand the context of blackness. And so then he goes around with wielding the power that we need and not using it appropriately. What do you think about that section?
No, I think you're right. He didn't use it appropriately, but also the reason he thinks he's going to be treated fairly is because white people have been pretty good to him. White people have been pretty good to him, from his family to getting into schools to, you know, how they treated him. He had been treated very good by white people. He hadn't had those experiences. Like, he talks about, I couldn't get into a cab. But what he really doesn't say is that I haven't had the experiences. And that's one thing that we go to all the time. Like, everybody's the same kind of black. Like, if we're black, we're the same kind of black. Like, if you have skin color, you're the same kind of black. Forget even being African-American. We know that Obama was not African-American. But even in terms of blackness, being the same kind of black. I'm a light-skinned black woman. I'm not the same kind of black as Antonio. The police are not going to react to me in the same way. The police are not going to react to a Harvard, mixed-race, eloquent, ingratiating, brown-skinned man, light brown-skinned man, the same way they react to other black people. It's not, somebody, to take one from the hood, or even from a lower middle class neighborhood. It's not the same thing. He doesn't have your experiences just because he's black. And then he was further pushed away from that by being raised by white people.
In Hawaii. Further
away from that by father being Kenyan.
In Hawaii. There wasn't a structure of Ferguson-like ticketing schemes that you can get caught in if you drive on that other side of town. They just didn't have that. Hawaii just was like, you cool. You with the store owner or the furniture store owner. So we know that you're good. And so the last two sections from Coates' piece are probably the most racy. I use both in my Newsmax piece. Please do check it out again. My Newsmax piece is called, African Americans didn't do well under President Obama. But these two sections were just out of this world wrong. The first is this is from ta-nehisi Coates. He wrote his piece. I keep coming back to it. My president was black, and this is one of the sections. Again, what Obama was able to offer white America is something very few African Americans could: trust. The vast majority of us are necessarily too crippled by our defenses to ever consider such a proposition. But Obama, through a mixture of ancestral connections and distance from the poisons of Jim Crow, can credibly and sincerely trust the majority population of this country. That trust is reinforced, not contradicted, by his blackness. Obama isn't shuffling before white power like Herman Cain or flattering white ego like O.J. Simpson. I mean, for me, this was one of the most incredulous responses. Like, this was just horrible. I mean, to tell black people that they're crippled rather than tell white people that they're racist is the worst thing ever. And to say that this man isn't crippled, and so as a result, he has trust that we don't have, so it makes him super Negro. It's just like, what are you talking about, Ta-Nehisi Coates? And fundamentally for me, it puts the onus back on black people for being the victims. That's like blaming a rape victim for getting raped and saying, well, you hate Lynn now. No, I got raped, and they never did no psychological services to help me, any of those things. I'm right that you're crippled as a result, and you're
you're too crippled to deal with men now. No, I need some help, and nobody ever gave me none.
Yeah. What do you think about that section?
Well, I think that goes to what like Coates is really kind of rewriting history. Coates is saying, like, the problem, again, like, this is what he said earlier in the article to my mind. Coates is saying, again, that the problem isn't, the problem is us. Like, the problem is we're not like Obama. Like, we don't have the tools or the family structure to get white people to trust us. So we are, again, he points to us as, like, we're the problem. No, we're not crippled at all. As a matter of fact, we weren't crippled. Obama was crippled because we were sitting around saying, hey, this isn't going to go well. No matter what you do, this is how they're going to see you. And they're going to see you, even though you aren't African-American, they're going to see you as a representative of us because of how you have used us and played the music, and they're going to stop you at every turn. It was Obama who was too crippled by his own ancestry and how he had been treated by white people all his life to see how this was going to play out. We all knew how it was going to play out. We were fine. He was crippled.
I agree, and I come back to even, to have a black man that writes at that level for the Atlantic say this about black people, I was offended. Black people are not crippled, and I just feel like he owes us all an apology for writing that down in that magazine. And for those that don't understand the level of it, you really should look back at your like look at your family and what they went through. And understand that what he's saying is that crippled you. No, I believe it made you stronger. And so, I can't say much more about that. The last section probably was the most telling about Obama and why I myself have such an issue with him being called the first African American president. I don't believe the first African American president would utter these words. This is again from Ta-Nehisi Coates' piece. Obama had been on record as opposing reparations, but now late in his presidency, he seemed more open to the idea, in theory at least, if not in practice. Theoretically, this is Obama's quote, theoretically, you can make obviously a powerful argument that centuries of slavery, Jim Crow, discrimination are the primary cause for all those gaps, Obama said, referencing the gulf in education, wealth, and employment that separates black and white America. That those were wrongs to the black community as a whole, and black families specifically, and that in order to close that gap, a society has a moral obligation to make a large, aggressive investment. Obama went on to say that it would be better and more realistic to get the country to rally behind a robust liberal agenda. To call slavery and Jim Crow the theoretical causes of wealth gaps that black people suffered from is historically ignorant. And this is our president. It's the direct cause. This is based on discussions with billionaires, i.e. Byron Allen, with leading economists, i.e. Sandy Garrity. It's no question that the reason black people are poor today is because white people made them poor. And like it's just a trip because he says it's theoretical. And I was just like, how do you say that and have any kind of gall? How do you have the gall to say that?
Yeah, I mean, but and then the man who's in control of all the institutions of whiteness now. Like, you have one moment, like in life, if you get your shot, you take it. This was Obama's shot, and even with this, we've already talked about the stuff that he could have did without Congress. But even before that, you had a couple of years there, right, where you had your majority. And you had enough, and you didn't do anything. But it goes back to what you say, like to have a black president who has control over these institutions. Even if you don't have control over anything else, you have control over your Justice Department. You have control over your Department of Commerce, all of that. And to have him say that this is theoretical, I mean, what a failure. We understand now why you're a failure. And I don't know whether you don't know or you're just lying, because he's also our constitutional law professor president. So it's hard for me to believe that you know all of this, but you are not sure that this is the cause of the wealth gap, that you don't know this. No, you just don't want to do anything about it. And he always does that. You'll notice when he talks about criminal injustice, he says, well, I understand why black people would feel that they're treated differently. No, it's not about how we feel. We have studies now that show, and this is the language that Obama uses all the time to kind of undermine us. And then to say, like, yeah, you're kind of coming around on it, like when you don't have the power to do anything about it. You know what I mean? That's like a guy, you know, when he turns 45, he say, yeah, you know, I'm 6'4", I think I might try out for the NBA. What for? Like, this is something. What do you mean? Like, you're 45. So I mean, it was just the most. That was what offended me most. I was offended most when he called that theoretical. There's more than enough data to show and prove this. And I think if you're interviewing him, and this is the failure of Ta-Nehisi Coates, if you're interviewing him at that moment, you go in for the kill. If you're interviewing Obama at that moment, you go in for the kill. What do you mean theoretical? I can show you study after study after study. Why would you say that? Why are you saying that? And why are you using that language to undermine the community and put you in the White House? That's what you say. He didn't say anything. He just kind of went along and said, well, it looks like he is coming around. That's a failure of Coates. That's a failure of Obama, but to not drill in on that is his failure.
And as we come towards the end of the conversation, the last thing, I'm gonna give you that last word on Coates, but like what I'm going to discuss a bit, I don't want to spend too much more time because this is a long conversation, is Sandy Darity, leading one of the foremost structural economists. I mentioned him a couple times throughout this discussion. Interviewed him 2 weeks ago. Check that out on my channel or on Breaking Brown. You can do it on Tone Talks or Breaking Brown. And he did a response piece to Coates right on the Atlantic. And Coates couldn't do nothing but what I must pull up right now as far as his Twitter, because it's that real. And what Sandy Darity, it's funny because I sent him my Newsmax piece the day before yesterday, and then he came out with his Atlantic piece. And I talked to him today, and it's just holding feet to the fire. We can't let these people just say anything about us, and it's just okay. It's not happening. Not happening on my watch. And so what I wanted to share with you is a section from Darity's piece, get Yvette's opinion, have my opinion, and then we'll kind of close out on that note. It's a bit of a longer section, but I think it's more than necessary. You can check out Darity's piece. I'm pulling it up right now. How Barack Obama failed Black Americans. So this is not just me. This is not just Yvette saying this. This is a lot of academics that are saying this. It's just not on CNN and MSNBC. But believe me, there's truth to this story. So here's Darity's piece. Or this is the excerpt, I should say. In his fascinating profile of Obama, Ta-Nehisi Coates refers to the mark of a system engineered to place one on top of the other, to place white over black. He offers some examples. The facts that blacks with a college degree have an unemployment rate almost as high as white high school graduates. That completion of a college education leads blacks to carry twice the level of student loan debt than whites 4 years after the degree. That blacks experience a significantly higher default rate on their loans. That black households have 1/7 of the wealth of white households. And that black families with $100,000 or more in income reside in quote-unquote more disadvantaged neighborhoods than white families making less than $30,000. What Darity says is, sadly, these actually are softer illustrations of the mark of the system than findings that have emerged from research I have done with Derek Hamilton, Ann Price, and other members of the National Asset Scorecard. We find a much higher discrepancy between black and white wealth than the gap that Coates reports. Blacks with some college education actually have higher unemployment rates than whites who never finished high school. Understand that, what he just said. At each level of education, the black rate of unemployment is twice as high as the white rate. Moreover, the relative economic position on virtually all indicators, including the racial unemployment rate gap, has not improved since the passage of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. This is the last few lines. Estimates generated from the 2013 round of the Federal Reserve Survey of Consumer Finances indicate that black households have 1/13 of the wealth of white households at the median. That's a direct shot at Coates, who said 1/7, saying that your data isn't right. We have concluded that the average black household would have to save 100% of its income for 3 consecutive years to close the wealth gap. The key source of the black-white wealth gap is the intergenerational effects of transfers of resources. White parents have far greater resources to give their children via gifts and inheritances, so that the typical white young adult starts their working lives with a much greater initial net worth than the typical black young adult. Gifts in the form of college payments, gifts in the form of your first car, gifts in the form of your first house or the down on your first house. White people are doing this, especially college level, like the college class of white America. And the last line is, these intergenerational effects are blatantly non-meritocratic. And I just wanted to get your opinion on that section, and then I'll say mine, and we'll kind of end there.
I mean, I mean, that was an indictment of Coates, you're right, but it was an indictment of so much more. Like, it was an indictment. Like, I could look at that and say that's an indictment on 70% of the black people who've been talking about what black people need to do in order to be successful. Like, that quote right there wipes out everybody that you've been listening to. People were telling you, well, you got to work hard. No, I don't. Even if I work, this data shows that even if I work hard, I don't have the wealth of a white person who's unemployed. And it shows like, well, get an education. No, at all levels of wealth, there's a huge gap between white and black people. Everything, like, you have to get to the point where you understand everything that you've been told is a lie. Everything you've been told about how you're going to close the wealth gap is a lie. And then you're still living on the edge because you could be fired any moment. Like, you know, just like a white guy might be hired any moment. So it's an indictment of when I you know, on my Breaking Brown on the call-in show on my YouTube channel, check that out. But if you check it out, when I talked about Darity, you know, doing one of the shows, it was just amazing when you looked at the charts, and I put the charts up there. When you put the charts up there, how far we are behind at all levels, even when we do our best. And it's not about financial literacy, because what he says is that black people have a savings rate that's on par with white people, and sometimes higher when you consider that we have less. Okay, so it's not about financial literacy. It's not about education. It's not about hard work. It's about transfer of resources, transfer of wealth from generation to generation, and we don't have it. And I think that just takes that line, that paragraph, just takes a knife to so many arguments that we've been told that just aren't true.
Thank you, and I'm so proud of you. I'm so proud of Darity for writing this response, and I appreciate all the positive comments I've gotten on my own piece. You know, so many people said, "Oh, how could you write on Newsmax?" And for those people, Newsmax opinion section, Robert Wright, the economist from Berkeley, he writes there. Liberal economist Fareed Zakaria from CNN, he writes there. We got to expand our circles. That's like reading one article from the Griot or the Root and saying they're a celebrity gossip site. They're much more than that. And the same thing goes for like an independent site like Newsmax. Yeah, you might have read one article that goes this way, but expand your circle and just look into what you're actually critiquing. But on this particular comment, you know, I gave an analogy to Byron Allen that I think really fits right here. We love to use the race example, and I'm going to pull up a picture, you know, that we've been left, you know, they had a head start. That's not what happened. We're the shoes. We're the equipment they use. And now we have a hole in us. And now we're saying, can I get in the race? No, you're the shoes. And you're still the shoes. They just now try to talk to you like you're not the shoes. And it makes you feel like you have a chance. And I know it's hard to accept that, but Black America is on the verge of economic collapse. When you have families of three, the middle family, living on with a wealth level of $1,700, when you have the middle black single mother, and we know that 70% of babies are born out of wedlock, black babies, worth $5. $5. You know that we're living check to check, moment to moment. And I feel like one of the things that I'm proud of with Darity is that he held Ta-Nehisi Coates and Obama to the fire, because for like I said in my piece, all we've heard for the last like few months from black media, African American media, is how, you know, Obama was great as a black man and a role model. And the thing is, who's he a role model for? Like a white kid that has a Harvard MA, like dad. He's not like, and so like, let's start looking at intergenerational wealth. Let's start looking at inheritance. Let's start looking at the realities of why that don't exist. And then let's stop saying stuff like, well, reparations will never happen. That's not for us to say. Let's demand what we owe. And then make them say that they don't want to give us this, or they're going to give us that instead. And that's where I'm at with mine. I mean, this was a powerful discussion. Was Obama the first African-American president? Everybody can have their own opinion. I gave you mine earlier. And I hope that you share this video. Please subscribe to Breaking Brown. Subscribe to Tone Talks. donate to our channels. That's how we're able to bring this information, bring this data. I'm gonna keep bringing pieces. I'm gonna try to do another one coming up about how Barack Obama trafficked on black celebrity, and like that's really like his key to fame. Trying to, he was like a rock star / rapper, and that's how Black America kind of visualized him instead of a politician, and that's why we didn't know how to ask him for things. But thank you so much for tuning in. Please subscribe, and talk to you guys soon.